After weeks of viral memes and endless TikToks dissecting their Snow White parody, the Family Guy writers have reportedly broken their silence. Sort of. Do I have to? You want to be a star, don't you? Then take it off. That biting line, lifted straight from the episode, set the tone. According to industry insiders, the writers are standing firmly behind their Disney roast, especially the way they skewered the fallout from Rachel Zegler's public meltdown. Family Guy hasn't issued an official statement. They rarely do. No apologies, no damage control. But sources close to the show say the message from the writer's room is crystal clear. We said what everyone was already thinking. And that's the genius of it. They didn't even need to mention Zegler by name. A roller coaster labeled Disney stock collapsing with Peter Griffin screaming, "What is everything?" was enough. Just like that, Zegler stopped being merely a controversial actress. She became a symbol. A stand-in for corporate storytelling gone hollow, for the fading magic of fairy tales in the eyes of many viewers. Insiders believe the team never expected the parody to explode quite this big. But once it did, they leaned in. They've been at this long enough to know when they've struck a cultural nerve, and this one hit like a hammer. Ironically, their silence has only amplified the firestorm. No clarifications, no behind-the-scenes commentary, just the episode and the fallout. Fans are dissecting every frame, assigning meaning to visual gags and throwaway lines, debating whether each jab was intentional or accidental brilliance. The timing couldn't have been sharper. Just days earlier, resurfaced clips of Zegler went viral again, dismissing the original Snow White as outdated, calling the prince a stalker, and insisting the remake didn't need a love story. On their own, those quotes were cringeworthy. But in the shadow of Family Guy's parody, they felt prophetic. And that's what made the episode sting. To many, the problem wasn't simply Zegler's commentary. It was the larger feeling that everything familiar was being rewritten. Characters unrecognizable, legacies stripped down, stories rebuilt without their soul. Stories that once dripped with wonder are now delivered with corporate-approved messaging. Audiences don't feel enchanted. They feel lectured, and then along came Family Guy. In a single breakdown, voiced through a cartoon man-child, the show landed an emotional truth 1,000 think pieces couldn't touch. The line, "What is everything?" erupted online. It showed up on fan merch, political edits, movie trailers, even celebrity interviews. Overnight, it became shorthand for cultural confusion, a stand-in for a generation trying to keep up with a Hollywood that keeps moving the goalposts. And standing right in the center of that shifting ground? Rachel Zegler. Insiders say the Family Guy team watched the meme storm with quiet satisfaction. They hadn't named her. They didn't need to. Audiences did the math themselves. And once they did, the internet did the rest, looping, dragging, and remixing the gag until satire blurred into reality. When a cartoon meltdown feels more honest than a $250 million blockbuster, something's cracked. That's the paradox. In the era of clapbacks and callouts, Family Guy pulled off something deadlier. They stayed silent. No cutaway gag of Zegler at a podium. No name drop. And still, everyone knew. When the subtext is deafening, the name becomes irrelevant. Take the Disneyland bit. Peter Griffin staggers through the park as a roller coaster labeled Disney stock nosedives in the background. That isn't just parody, it's diagnosis. Insiders say this brand of strategic silence is classic Family Guy. It keeps them safe from lawsuits, sure, but more importantly, it leaves the audience to color in the blanks. And color it in they did. TikTok lit up with mashups of Rachel's press clips spliced between Family Guy scenes. Twitter ran with side-by-sides, Peter screaming, "What is everything?" paired with Rachel calling the prince a stalker. YouTube analysts didn't even ask if she was the target. They assumed it. What began as a jab at Hollywood's identity-driven storytelling mutated into a roast of Rachel Zegler by proxy. That's the brilliance and the brutality of Family Guy's playbook. They don't swing for the direct hit. They scatter breadcrumbs and let the internet finish the job. If Family Guy's mockery felt like a single sharp strike, South Park came in with the equivalent of a full-scale bombardment. Long before Peter Griffin stumbled his way through Disneyland or blurted out the now infamous, "What is everything?" Trey Parker and Matt Stone had already shaken the industry with their special episode, joining the Panderverse. This wasn't just another gag-filled adventure. It was a calculated, razor-edged piece of satire so bold that even people inside Disney, according to reports, were left speechless. The special didn't bother easing into its critique. It opened with a thinly veiled caricature of Kathleen Kennedy, Disney's long-standing creative executive, who is handed a mystical artifact, the so-called Panderstone. With it, she gains the power to insert a diverse woman into any franchise she chooses, no matter the storyline, tone, or audience preference. From there, the chaos unravels. Cartman finds himself spiraling through multiverse after multiverse, each one showcasing a beloved franchise completely reworked into overly sanitized, politically inflated versions of themselves. The joke isn't subtle, and that's the point. It's not merely poking fun at the idea of swapping characters or fresh casting, it's tearing into a much deeper problem, the corporate instinct to play it safe. The episode portrays major studios as being less interested in storytelling and more concerned with avoiding social media outrage. Then came the line that instantly broke through the noise. Kennedy's exaggerated character, arms flung into the air, delivers her command with robotic cheer, "Put a chick in it and make her gay." What could have been dismissed as just another edgy punchline quickly became something else entirely. The phrase spread like wildfire online, embraced by critics who felt it neatly summed up why so many modern blockbusters seem to feel less like epic escapes and more like preachy, boardroom-approved messages. People who work behind the scenes say the creators of South Park knew exactly what they were doing. As one insider bluntly put it, they're not subtle. They spotted the cultural shift early, recognized where the frustrations were building, and decided to fire their shot before anyone else dared to. And it worked. The fallout was immediate. Snow White, which was already catching flack, suddenly became a lightning rod. After joining the Panderverse aired, skepticism toward the film hardened into outright disdain. The perception went from "maybe this won't work" to "this is already doomed." Audiences, once cautiously waiting to see what Disney would deliver, began echoing South Park's punchlines instead of defending the project. What Family Guy managed with one viral line, South Park had amplified into a cultural earthquake. And in doing so, it tapped into a conversation that was already bubbling just beneath the surface. Are today's blockbusters being crafted for fans, or for boardrooms terrified of online backlash? The brilliance of the episode wasn't just its humor, but its timing. By the moment it landed, the fatigue around hollow reboots and forced reinventions was everywhere. Social media was filled with audiences rolling their eyes at new takes that often felt less about artistry and more about checking corporate boxes. Parker and Stone didn't just notice the sentiment, they weaponized it into a storyline so outrageous it made people laugh and rage at the same time. And that's what turned joining the Panderverse into more than an episode of television. It became a reference point, a cultural shorthand for frustration with modern Hollywood. The joke wasn't just on Disney, it was on an entire industry that seemed to have lost faith in storytelling and overinvested in appeasing Twitter trends. After weeks of nonstop memes and TikTok edits mocking their Snow White parody, the team behind Family Guy has, according to industry whispers, quietly made their stance known. They aren't apologizing. If anything, they're doubling down. Reports from entertainment insiders suggest the writers stand firmly behind their Disney takedown, especially the way they satirized the storm that surrounded Rachel Zegler's very public controversies. Officially, Family Guy hasn't released a statement. They never do. Damage control isn't their style. But those close to the production say the message from the writer's room is unmistakable. "We said what everyone else was already thinking." That outlook, insiders believe, reflects how the creators saw the moment. Snow White's chaos wasn't just ripe for mockery, it practically begged for it. And in their eyes, Zegler's behavior made her the perfect unspoken centerpiece of the gag. That's the clever twist. They never mentioned her by name. They didn't have to. A single shot of a roller coaster labeled Disney stock collapsing, paired with Peter Griffin screaming, "What is everything?" told the story better than a dozen pointed jokes ever could. In that instant, Zegler stopped being seen as Hollywood's bright newcomer, and fairly or unfairly morphed into a symbol of corporate storytelling stripped of heart, of fairy tales drained of magic. Sources say the writers didn't fully anticipate the scale of the reaction. But once the episode went viral, they leaned into it. They've been at this long enough to recognize when they've tapped into something larger than a gag, and this time the cultural nerve they struck hit harder than usual. Interestingly, their refusal to engage has only stoked the flames. No clarifications, no explanations, no behind-the-scenes commentary, just the episode itself, standing on its own. And fans have filled in the gaps. Online forums are flooded with people combing through every frame, decoding visual cues, debating hidden meanings, and turning throwaway lines into cultural talking points. The timing couldn't have been sharper. Only days before the episode aired, Rachel Zegler's old interviews resurfaced across social media. In them, she dismissed the original Snow White as outdated, called the prince a stalker, and insisted the remake would scrap the love story entirely. On their own, the comments had already sparked frustration. But coming right before Family Guy's parody, they landed like confirmation. To many viewers, the show's chaos felt less like comedy and more like prophecy. And that's what cut the deepest. For longtime fans, it wasn't just about a single movie or actress. It was the bigger picture. Beloved characters no longer resembled the ones they grew up with. Stories that once carried wonder and innocence now felt filtered through boardroom agendas. What was supposed to be enchanting escapism had, in their eyes, turned into carefully polished corporate messaging. Instead of being invited along on an adventure, audiences felt talked down to. Audiences didn't just feel let down, they felt lectured. And somehow, Family Guy's meltdown, delivered through the exaggerated voice of a bumbling cartoon dad, landed closer to the emotional truth than countless essays ever managed. The moment Peter Griffin shouted, "What is everything?" it ignited like wildfire online. The phrase showed up on t-shirts, got spliced into political ads, slipped into movie trailer edits, and even appeared in celebrity interviews. It quickly became a cultural shorthand, a way of expressing the confusion of a generation watching Hollywood shift the ground under their feet. And standing at the center of that shifting ground was Rachel Zegler. Insiders claim the Family Guy team didn't flinch as the meme exploded across platforms. They hadn't singled anyone out by name, and they didn't need to. Viewers connected the dots themselves, and once they did, the internet spun it endlessly until satire and reality seemed indistinguishable. When a cartoon meltdown resonates more deeply with audiences than a $250 million blockbuster, something feels off. Family Guy hadn't just mocked Disney. They'd handed the public the perfect phrase to say it out loud. In today's world of constant clapbacks and public callouts, Family Guy pulled a different trick. They stayed silent and let everyone else do the math. No character ever pointed directly to Rachel Zegler. No animated cutaway mocked her likeness. Yet viewers instantly recognized who was in the crosshairs. When subtext is that loud, you don't need names. That was the brilliance. Take the Disneyland scene. Peter Griffin stumbles around in confusion while, behind him, a roller coaster labeled Disney Stock plunges straight down. It isn't framed as a metaphor, it's presented as a diagnosis. People familiar with the show's creative process say this kind of silence is textbook Family Guy. It keeps them legally shielded from accusations of defamation, sure, but more importantly, it invites the audience to complete the joke. And when a cultural storm is already raging, the audience doesn't just fill in the blanks, they amplify them. The proof came the moment the episode aired. TikTok lit up with edits blending Zegler's press clips into the episode. Twitter filled with side-by-side comparisons, Peter screaming, "What is everything?" right next to Zegler calling the prince a stalker. On YouTube, creators didn't wonder if she was the target. They assumed it. What was meant as a broad roast of Hollywood's identity-driven storytelling quickly became, by proxy, a roast of Rachel Zegler herself. That's the ruthless elegance of Family Guy's playbook. They don't need to risk a direct hit. They scatter just enough breadcrumbs and then step back, letting the internet take over. But if Family Guy's strike felt precise, South Park's response was a full-scale bombardment. Long before Peter Griffin wandered through Disneyland or bellowed his confused catchphrase, Trey Parker and Matt Stone had already dropped their own explosive special, joining the Panderverse. This episode didn't tiptoe into controversy. It marched straight in. From the start, it featured a character unmistakably modeled after Kathleen Kennedy, Disney's longtime producer. She's given a mystical object called the Panderstone, a device granting her the power to force a diverse woman into any franchise she touches, no matter the plot, tone, or audience expectations.